Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Maureen Schwehr, and I'm a naturopathic doctor. And when I was asked to share through this series, I was thinking about healthy habits and what we want to do. And as a naturopathic doctor, I'm always talking to people about what they need to do to change things in their lives, like how to get to the cause. I'm interested in the cause, and um, what I mean by that is that underneath so much illness and anxiety, depression are the underlying causes. For instance, if we don't have the proper nutrients, if our digestion isn't online, we can't make the right neurotransmitters to feel well. If we don't get enough sleep, it's really hard not to be anxious and to have a positive life. And so when I'm doing that, what I find is that change is hard. The reality in our life is that advice is cheap and sadly plentiful, and change is really hard and often scary for people. So I started doing more research into how do we really change? And what I fell upon was a lot of information regarding habits. And so I wanted to share that with you. So to start with, we're going to take a little bit of a broader view, and that broader view is the idea of energy money. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with or read any of the books by Carolyn Myss, but Carolyn Myss talks about this idea of energy money. Carolyn Myss was a best-selling author, and she's written a lot of really good self-help books. So she has this idea of energy money. Every day we wake up with $100 of energy money in our bank account. And once we have that money in our bank account, we have to decide what we want to do with it. So we can spend all of our energy money being angry at the guy who parked in front of our mailbox again, or we can spend our energy money investing in positive things. If we spend some of that money going for a walk with our puppy, for instance, we will likely end up with more energy money at the end of it. I think this is such a really nice way of looking at our day. And one of the things I recommend often to my patients is to take a moment and sort of write down on an average day, where are you spending your energy money? How much of it are you investing in yourself? And I think for so many of us, we often just don't invest enough of it in fun, in healthy sleep, in taking care of ourselves. So many of us are really primed to give our energy money away to other people. So I wanted to start with that because I think a big part of this, when I was looking at the science of habits, is to recognize that so much of what we do is habit. And the first step is often just taking stock of where we are. So the way the brain is designed, we have this, our brain is associative. And what I mean by that is whenever we see cues, whenever we encounter a certain situation, our brain analyzes it and says, what is this like in other things? So for instance, today you're on this webinar. You probably have been on webinars before, so you know what to do. You know to sit comfortably in your chair, you know to maybe sip your coffee. It isn't, your brain associates this experience with other webinars you've had. If every single time we had a new experience, we had to figure out what to do, it would be exhausting. So our brain has this way of making things efficient. This also helps us to satisfy our needs. It means that we are efficient and be able to get things done. And I think one of the things is that for so much of our day, these habits that are consuming our time are unconscious. So one of the first steps in figuring out how to have more healthy habits or how to have a life that is more balanced is to take a moment and assess what's going on. Where am I spending my time? What is happening? And to start looking at habits and recognizing what you do every day, because it's often unconscious. We can eat up a large part of our energy money doing things that don't necessarily serve us or aren't really helping us. So as I said, we learn and we remember and we often react by association. So for instance, when I wake up, one of the first things my brain thinks about is drinking coffee. And when I do that, I get a reward, which is feeling more alert. So that's a very strong association for me. If I am somewhere traveling and I don't have a way to get coffee, my brain spends a lot of time figuring out where the nearest Starbucks is. So other sort of automatic things we associate, we feel bored. One of the things we might do is turn on the TV, and then the reward is to be entertained. We aren't necessarily consciously doing it. When we're bored, we start looking around, and one of the things my brain thinks is, maybe I should just turn on the TV. Stress. So stress is something that is such a strong driver for so many of us. And so when we're stressed, all of us have our different strategies. For some people, when they stress, they reach for a cigarette. For some people, when they're stressed, they may decide to go for a run. One of my common things is when I'm stressed, my brain suddenly decides it's hungry. And eating a treat is a really common response to that. So if you have a muffin, what happens is the dopamine that's released lowers our anxiety. So we have this pattern of a event, a habit, and then a reward. This pattern goes on throughout our day. And one of the things I wanted to do with this is just to bring this forward for consciousness. So mornings are a really important time. Our brains associate change with new beginnings. That's one of the reasons why there's New Year's resolutions. And that's actually a very healthy thing. There is something about that. We have a lot of sayings, tomorrow's a new day, the sun always rises. This is a way of reminding us that one of the strengths of the human brain is that we see new beginnings as a chance to start over. We see new beginnings as a way to be able to see, like, okay, whatever might have went wrong before, whatever is bothering me, there's a chance that that's going to move on, and then I'm going to have this new beginning. Mornings are also a time that are usually really heavily habit-filled. We have our habits around morning, and I'm encouraging all of us to sort of take a moment and think about what those morning habits are. And I think in today's world, one of the big habits that we should be assessing is where in that morning routine do we start connecting to the day. I really noticed as I was putting together this presentation, like I paid attention. What do I do in the morning? Because it's subconscious. One of the first things I do is grab my phone. It lays next to my bed, and in the morning I often get up and I check to see, do I have any emails that are important, what it is. Then I'll often get up, take my supplements, and then I make my coffee, and then I get the paper. So what I'm doing there is some things that are taking care of me, but also when I reach to the paper, the problem in these days is that often picking up my phone, looking at the news media is actually something that is not good for my health. This is a slide that I took from some of my other presentations. I use this concept so often. So when we look at how our brains are wired, it helps us to know how to be happy and healthy. So there are three parts to the brain. The brain stem is that basic part, the part of our brain that we share with reptiles. It's the part of the brain that is activated in fight or flight response. So if there's suddenly a huge thunderstorm, for instance, your brainstem may notice and send out and tell your adrenal glands to make some adrenaline because the storm sort of heightens your awareness. So on top of the brainstem, we have our limbic system, or our emotional brain. This is the part of the brain we share with mammals. So inside the limbic system, we have the amygdala, and the amygdala here is a really important part of our brain. The amygdala's job is to decide if we're safe or not safe. And this is a really, this part of our brain is always on, and it's always assessing every situation. So the way your clothes feel on your body right now, what you see around you, if someone suddenly came running into the room yelling, your amygdala would notice because its job is to assess all input to decide if it's safe or not safe. So this is really the problem. Our brains were developed to live in small communities. Our brains were developed to highly activate when people we know and care about are in danger. So if when we wake up in the morning and we see our best friend is really sick and struggling, that's going to activate our body, and that's a really healthy response. The trouble is this. The trouble is that instead what we do is connect to our phones, or we connect to the paper or to the news. And the trouble with the news is that they know that to get our attention, scaring people and making us afraid is a really powerful thing. So what often happens is that it's very negative focused. So if we read a story about a nice mom who was really sick from COVID and then died while her children watched her, that activates our system as if it were our best friend. And the news is really counting on that. And so I think that assessing whether or not the best thing to do in the morning is to connect to that kind of negative bias. If we cut that out, it often starts our day and our nervous system in a calm state instead of a highly activated one. So I already did that. So the 4 pillars of health. If we look, we just break things down. I think that diet, sleep, movement, relationships are the 4 pillars of health. And having balance and goodness in all 4 of those creates a stable, healthy, vibrant life. So the way to really make changes, I have decided, is that all of us need to become habit experts and just sort of hack the habit system and understand how the brain does this. Creating and sustaining habits is a skill that can be learned and improved. Willpower plays a much smaller part in success or failure than we thought. So the studies have really shown, we have this myth that willpower is the way strong people are and have a lot of willpower succeed, and people who are weak and don't have willpower fail. It's not really that. If you break it down, people who appear to have a lot of willpower often are just highly skilled at creating habits. So there are many good books out there around habits. I'm just going to talk today about Atomic Habits, and I'm naming him because he deserves it. He's written a great book. James Clear's Atomic Habits, I highly recommend it. It's a short, easy book, and he really talks about the basics of how you create and maintain good habits and how you also hack the system to eliminate bad habits. So the 4 basic rules are: make it obvious, meaning you give yourself the clues to be able to do it. He uses the example, he wanted to eat apples, more apples, so he took the apples out of the bin and put them on the counter in the middle of his kitchen. When the apples are obvious, he eats them. When they're hidden away, they don't. Make it attractive. Link your habits to activities that you enjoy. We're going to talk about that a little more. Making it easy. It's that hack. So the way to start practicing and creating good habits is to make it easy. And his recommendation, and I agree, is to start by deciding you're going to do a 2-minute habit change and that you keep it to 2 minutes. Deciding something that is vague and large, like I want to exercise more, is a useless concept. What is helpful is saying in the morning, right after I drink my coffee, I'm going to put on my shoes and walk around the block. That is a helpful and useful way to change behavior. Make it satisfying. Linking this small change in behavior to something that is a reward, and we're going to talk a little bit about some reward ideas. So to break it down, make it obvious. Write it down, be specific. Time, location, and activity is important. Very, very clear about when it is. Not something vague like tomorrow I'll do it. You need to be absolutely specific. Tomorrow at this time, at this location, I will do this specific thing. Link it to a current habit. So for instance, I wanted to start using my water pick. So I link it to my evening habit of brushing my teeth. I always brush my teeth. After I brush my teeth, I add the water pick in. By linking it, I don't have to randomly remember throughout the day. And change the environment to provide clues and cues for you to do that, like the example of putting the apples out there. For instance, I move my water pick from underneath the sink to the top of my sink, so it's obvious when I go in the bathroom at night that it's right there. The second rule, make it attractive. Pair it with something that you already do. So, for instance, the morning thing, if I always drink coffee and I enjoy drinking coffee, then saying after I get my first cup of coffee, I put on my shoes and I walk around the block, I'm much more likely to do it. Choose to be around those that support this habit. Asking a friend to join me in my morning walk would be a really useful thing. Bringing community into it is very helpful. With all of this, it's about realizing that the cues and how we set up change is really what determines whether or not it works. It isn't about having some massive willpower. Being specific, setting things up, and linking it to things you already do are great ways to make it happen. And then creating a motivational ritual that you do before the new habit. So I like that idea of like the coffee piece. Or even if I decide like I'm going to take my dog for a walk around the block, then afterwards maybe I give my dog a treat. Because actually giving my dog a treat feels like a reward to me as well, because my dog is so happy when I give her a treat. All right, making it easy. I talked a little bit about this. So 2 minutes or less, I think this is very important. It's important to be successful when we look at changing habits. And so starting with something that is just a couple of minutes and takes only a couple of minutes is really important. We don't want to fail when we start practicing this. Most of us are just not that good at creating new habits. It feels as if our world is some sort of whirlwind that pushes us around, but the truth is that understanding how habit formation works and putting those pieces in place will create success. Decreasing the steps needed to implement. So that's another example where, for instance, if I want to take that walk in the morning, maybe before I go to bed, I put my shoes on the floor in the kitchen in front of where I make my coffee every morning. And then making it satisfying is really important. I think one of the problems is we're really hard on ourselves. And when we accomplish something, whatever it is, it's so easy for us to then diminish it. Like, I remember when I finished naturopathic school, some part of my overactive brain was like, now you should get a second degree in this. And then I thought, what's wrong with you? You have a good degree. You can go ahead and do it. We tend to minimize our successes. And so taking a moment, if you go around the block afterwards, to savor that and say, wow, that was really pleasant, like that was really good, and allowing yourself to recognize that can really help to reinforce the goodness in it. Pay attention to what you're saying inside your head. Are you a good friend that encourages your habits, or are you a negative Nelly that's diminishing everything you do? Creating a way to track your habit has been found to be very helpful. There's been a lot of studies that say if you make a little chart and you say walk after coffee each morning, and you put a little check, that just doing that increases your chances of keeping that habit greatly. And James Clear has this rule, which I really like: never miss twice. So I think that helps me let go of the perfectionism. If one night I'm super tired and I don't use my water pick, it's not the end of the world. But the next night I really say, nah, we're not missing twice. And not allowing myself that second day, because once we go past 2 days, often we tend to drop things. So start by increasing the good. So looking at some examples from the 4 pillars. Diet, super simple things. Add a fresh vegetable or fruit to a meal. Decide on only one meal, and decide every lunch when I have my sandwich and chips, I'm also going to have 3 carrots. Cut them up, make them easy, put them in the front of your refrigerator. Do something simple. I really love this one. So many of us don't drink enough water. Drinking a glass of water before your morning coffee is a wonderful rule. Before you get that reward of your coffee, you simply drink a glass of water. Really helps to hydrate us. So many of us are dehydrated. Eating protein for breakfast. It's a really nice thing. So understanding when we put a solid protein like an egg or chicken sausage or even a serving of beans. I've had refried beans for breakfast. When we put that protein in, it stabilizes our blood sugar. Deciding we're going to add that in instead of focusing on taking away really is a better strategy. And then green smoothies, I have a handout at the end. We'll talk about that. So sleep. Sleep is so important, and so I'm giving you some quick hacks here. Setting a specific time to go to bed each night has been shown to be really helpful for sleep. Our sleep is habitual, and staying up an hour or 2 later on some nights and going to bed earlier really messes with our sleep cycles. Move the phone away from your bed, super good idea, especially if you tend to check it when you're having a hard time sleeping. Taking 2 minutes to do a stretch or yoga pose before bed will help to reset the nervous system and help sleep. Meditating is so helpful for sleep, and there's all sorts of apps with free meditation on right now. Setting an alarm 2 hours before you go to bed. If you're going to go to bed at 8, set an alarm every day for 8. At 8 o'clock, you take your phone and you place it in a location away from you, and you stay off your social media before you go to bed. That can help so much with sleep. It may not help the first night. You got to let yourself have a couple of days to let your brain settle and quit wanting to look at that phone. Movement is so important for mood and for our health. A short walk. Don't decide I have to go for 5 miles. Simple. Something like I'm going to just walk around the block is a great thing. You'll find yourself often loving it so much you go for 2, but you want to make that, you want to lower that resistance by making it easy. 2 minutes, just decide 2 minutes of anything, stretching, push-ups, a plank, whatever is doable for you. The most consistent predictor of if you exercise in a day is if you exercise the day before. And it doesn't matter how much. So doing 1 or 2 minutes of something actually really increases the chances of you doing it the next day. So superhero walk, I hope you guys can actually see me in this. I'll try to click it. So studies have shown that this posture lowers our stress level, and it increases our like testosterone, it increases our awake neurotransmitters. So I will literally, after I do something, walk around my house like this for a couple of minutes because it makes me feel better. So that pose can be really powerful. I like this, dance to one song. Turn on a song on your phone and look at the time and then just move. Dance for 1 minute. Relationships, an important pillar. Schedule time with people you enjoy. Everyday activities create bonds. Random acts of kindness. There's so much. I'm going to talk about Yale right now has their most popular online course, a course on the science of happiness, is free. And at the end of this presentation, I have the link for you. I highly recommend it. They talk about what really makes us happy. What we think makes us happy in our society is not true. Money and how much our success and work is very loosely linked with happiness. Once we attain a certain level, all of us seem to look at the next level. But for instance, random act of kindness seems to increase people's happiness very consistently. And right now, I think our world needs more of it. I also like a habit of listening to something positive, a positive podcast, checking in on a positive website, whatever is going to bring goodness and not fear into your soul. Letting go of perfection. A really important piece in this is really recognizing that habit creation, changing our life, is really not some magic thing that's based on willpower. There are some really basic skill sets that if you learn them, small changes will start. And before you know it, you will start having your life be much more what you're choosing instead of what's just automatically happening. So the goal is to notice if you try something new and you are not successful, that's no big deal. That's how it is for almost all of us. And whether or not you're successful in your first try really has nothing to do with long-term success. What matters is if you're willing to go back and assess where things went right and wrong and to change that. The goal is to notice what went wrong and be creative with your solutions. So if every day you want to take a walk, first thing when you get home from work, but you end up sitting on your sofa, maybe in the morning before you go to work, you flip your sofa over, so it's much harder to do that. We need to hack our life, like find ways to be able to cue ourselves to do what we really feel is important. And then looking at unmet emotional needs, they will undermine us. And so when you really are sabotaging yourself, it's time to step back and ask yourself what emotional need is not being met. Often, just changing one tiny thing makes us feel so much better and brings us on the path to keep going. Small changes are really what work. So this is a green smoothie recipe. It's the idea you take any blender and you This is a really great way to increase your nutrition. And all you need is a decent blender. And then I gave you some ideas here. The idea is you put in some veggies that feel good to you, some fruit, and then you put in some liquid, water, juice, or milk. And I gave you some details. There's lots of recipes online. A green smoothie is an amazing way to vastly increase your nutritional intake. And in this quick, easy way, you do it in the morning, it's done. You don't have to worry about cooking vegetables all day long. This is the second half of that, and then just a couple of resources. This is the Yale class. I so encourage you to do this class. I have a group of friends. We are taking it together, and then we're Zooming every week to encourage each other to do the homework. And the homework is things like do a random act of kindness. It's not like reading and writing homework. It's changing your life homework. Emotional brain training, this is their website. This is just a system that I have found really works for people who want to change their habits to be able to get to their the emotional problems that are undermining them. All right, so sorry, I went a little bit over. I'm going to look at some questions here. Oh, all right. What are some websites that you look at for positive feedback? Oh, I'm bad at remembering all these pieces. I like connecting to people that are really, sorry, I picked that question and I'm having a hard time with that. All right, I'm having a mind fart with that, so I'm going to just go forward if I can get to the questions again. I will literally sometimes just Google positive webcasts and I would say just go to the podcast section and look for authors that you like and people that you like and click on it and give it a try. Tony Robbins, that's it. I love his podcast. I think that he has a lot of really great things to say and some really empowering perspectives. So he's someone that you could start with. Also the gentleman, I do not remember his name, but he wrote the book Untethering the Soul. I have had some podcasts. I'm not sure if they're his own or on other people's, but his work is amazing as well. What is the reference? Again, it is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And if you click on the handout section, you'll get all the handouts and you'll be able to see it. I am so sorry. I think that I've run out of time. You guys have some really good questions, and I hope in the future I'll be able to come back and maybe get to more of those. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here. Have a great day.